On a rainy day, my wife kicked me out of the house. Lost and dazed, I wandered the streets when suddenly a runaway dump truck came charging toward me. Amidst intense pain and the blaring horn of the dump truck, I collapsed heavily into a pool of blood. Before losing consciousness, I saw Tommy, my wife Mary's, white moonlight. He looked calm and collected, holding a phone. "Mary, want to come stay at my place tonight?" Then he gave me a triumphant smile. I died. I was reborn. When I suddenly sat up in bed, the sunlight outside was just right, and the June breeze carried a hint of warmth. I stared blankly at the ceiling. The harsh screeching of brakes and the heart-wrenching crash from my past life still echoed in my ears. The dump truck lost control and crashed into me. Blood poured out, cold rainwater mixing with my blood as it flowed into the drain. At that moment, I realized just how fragile a person's life truly is. But fate actually gave me a chance to start over. I looked down at the date on my phone, my heart suddenly skipping a beat. Today was the day that the white moonlight from my past life returned to the country, and it was from today that my marriage completely began to fall apart. Mary and I have been married for 7 years. She is the eldest daughter of the Smith family, a businesswoman still beautiful, noble, and aloof. As for me, I was more like a sacrificial pawn in the marriage her mother forced upon her. For 7 years, she never truly regarded me as her husband. She never let me touch her, nor did she ever attend any gatherings with me. Even at family dinners, she would stand by coldly as those relatives mocked me for being useless and living off her, never once defending me. Her true love, Tom, was the scarlet mark etched deep in her heart. In my last life, after he returned to the country, the two of them were entangled beyond clarity, even openly becoming her partner. She went on dates with him every day. I saw it all, burning with anger inside, yet powerless to do anything. In the end, Mary didn't even give me a chance to process the divorce. She simply swept me out the door. But now everything starts over again. I stood in front of the mirror looking at myself. Just over 30, my face still young, but my eyes held a sharper edge. In my past life, I was a pushover. This life, sorry, I won't wait for you to betray me again. I'm going to divorce early and take control of my own destiny. Mary's phone suddenly rang. She was changing clothes, dressing elegantly and calmly. It was the outfit she wore to pick someone up at the airport. Her long-cherished white moonlight had returned. You've arrived at the airport. Okay, it'll be there right away. Her voice was light and carried a hint of uncontrollable joy. See, just like in a past life, I followed her out the door, quietly hailed the taxi, and trailed far behind her car. Airport VIP exit. Tom dragged his suitcase, dressed sharply in his suit, exuding charm. Mary smiled as she approached him, and the two exchanged smiles, oblivious to everyone else. Through the crowd, I watched them embrace, took out my phone, and snapped a photo with a click. The evidence was already in hand. There's no need to wait any longer. In the evening, Mary returned home. I was already sitting in the living room with several clear photos laid out on the coffee table. She was stunned. "You, what's going on?" I showed no expression and pointed at the photo. "Explain this." Her face changed slightly, but she quickly forced herself to stay calm. "You investigated me?" "Investigated?" I sneered. "Do you need me to investigate your warm embrace with another man at the airport?" "We just had a meal. Tom just returned to the country. I was just being a good host. Don't make a fuss." Mary still wore that aloof and superior expression as if I were the unreasonable villain. "So, let's get a divorce." My tone was cold as I directly threw down the divorce agreement. Mary finally panicked, shock flashing in her eyes for the first time. "What kind of joke is this? I don't want to play anymore." I didn't wait for her to keep arguing, turned around, and went back to the bedroom, locking the door, leaving her pacing anxiously in the living room. Little did she know. Tomorrow I'm going to sell off everything in the house, cutting off all possible escape routes. Since you can't bear the thought of divorce, then I'll be the one to run away first. In my past life, I waited for her through 7 years of loneliness. This life? Ha. I don't have that kind of time. The next morning, I woke up very early. Mary had slept in the living room last night, not closing her eyes all night. There was fatigue at the corners of her eyes, but her words remained firm. "Are you serious?" she asked me. I put on my clothes while replying coldly. "I've never been this serious before." She stared at me as if trying to find a trace of a joke on my face, but I gave her no explanation. She tried to defend herself. "Tom just came back yesterday. We're just friends. He hasn't had it easy abroad all these years." I was just doing a favor. "Your favor is really cheap," I sneered. "I didn't do anything inappropriate." "Whether you do it or not isn't up to you," I said, as I took the photos from the coffee table and put them into an envelope. "I've already had a lawyer draft the agreement. This afternoon, we're going to the Civil Affairs Bureau together." She widened her eyes. "You're really crazy. You want a divorce just over a meal?" I tossed the envelope aside. "It's not about this meal. It's about these 7 years." She was stunned. I stopped wasting words, put on my shoes, and left. Today, I had more important things to do. Sell off everything in the house as quickly as possible. At noon, I contacted merchants who buy old furniture and appliances and listed my watches, jewelry, and designer bags on second-hand platforms. Everything that could be sold was sold. Losing a bit of money didn't matter. Was that her money? What a joke. It was earned through 7 years of enduring my marriage in silence. In the evening, the house was almost empty. The refrigerator, washing machine, and TV were all moved out, leaving only her clothes and a few personal belongings. I stood in the living room looking at the empty house, which was exactly like my marriage with Mary. A shiny exterior, but completely hollow inside. At that moment, I felt no guilt, only a long-lost sense of relief. At 6 in the evening, Mary came back. The moment she opened the door, she was completely stunned. "What's going on at home?" She rushed into the living room, looking around at the bare walls and empty floor. She suddenly turned to me. "What have you done?" I stood by the window looking at her calmly. "Didn't you say no divorce? Then I'm leaving." Her pupils contracted sharply. "You sold everything in the house. Are you crazy?" "I'm leaving clean and clear." I took out my phone and threw the transaction records at her one by one. "Don't think I'll be waiting in this house for the wedding invitation between you and Tom. I didn't with him. Whether you did or not, you know yourself." She suddenly rushed up, grabbed my arm, her voice tinged with panic. "Where are you going? You can't leave. You said you didn't want a divorce." "Then you can keep clinging to this empty shell and drag it out." I shook off her hand. "I'm done playing along." Her eyes began to redden. "You can't just walk away like this. Leaving without a word is illegal. I'm calling the police." I sneered coldly. "Go ahead and call. Let's see if the police get involved in property division between spouses." "George, don't push me. You've been pushing me all along." I grabbed my luggage and stepped out the door without looking back. Mary didn't follow. She just stood at the doorway like a statue drained of its soul. The moment the door closed, I seemed to hear the sound of her heart breaking. Unfortunately, my heart has been broken for 7 years. Mary stood still, motionless for a long time. She tried calling, but no one answered. She sent messages on WeChat, but they vanished without a trace. She sat on the empty sofa, staring at the familiar yet strange house. Realizing for the first time that the man she always thought would wait for her forever was truly gone, she called Tom. "I'm not going. I don't want to go to the party. Didn't you say you were looking forward to seeing old friends? I'm just not in the mood right now." The moment she hung up, Images from the past 7 years flashed through her mind. Every time she coldly avoided him, every time she went to a party without letting George accompany her, every time he was mocked by relatives, she pretended not to hear. She suddenly felt a bit panicked. She thought maybe this time he really wasn't just throwing a tantrum. I sat in the airport waiting lounge and turned off my phone. I didn't want to be disturbed by anyone anymore. In this new life, I will start over. No one can control me anymore. No one can hold me back. If the divorce can't happen, so what? Do you really think I'll foolishly beg for a divorce like the male lead in a novel? If I can't get a divorce, you'll just leave anyway. This time I live only for myself. And you, Mary, whether you live or die, what does it have to do with me? I sat on the plane, watching the clouds drift slowly outside the window, feeling an unprecedented calm within. It all felt like a dream, but I knew this time I was truly free. The night before, I completely cut off all contact with Mary. She called dozens of times, but I couldn't be bothered to answer until early morning. She sent a text message. "Where exactly did you go?" I sneered coldly and switched my phone to airplane mode. "Weren't you unwilling to get a divorce? Then take your time dragging it out. I'm done playing with you." The moment I landed, I took a deep breath, rented a car, and checked into a hotel. Everything was arranged in perfect order. The next day, I used the money from selling the property to buy a small apartment outright. Quiet, a place to lie down, drink, and play games just right. No cold, bone-chilling looks from her, no icy villa, and no family relatives occasionally humiliating me with disdainful glances and "you're not worthy" remarks. I yawned, ordered takeout, and prepared to binge-watch shows on the sofa. The phone rang. Mary. I glanced over, scoffed, and continued eating with my head down. She was persistent, calling 5 or 6 times in a row before I finally answered. "Where have you been?" Her voice trembled with anxiety. "Eat." I took a bite of the ribs and replied calmly, "Where exactly are you?" There were a few seconds of silence on the other end. Then the tone suddenly turned cold. "Are you having fun playing hide-and-seek with me right now?" I squinted my eyes. "Why aren't you going to have dinner with your white moonlight now? Talking to me. Won't he get jealous?" Her breath caught. "I have already stopped contacting him." I sneered coldly. "You better go back to him quickly. Don't bother me while I'm eating." "You, George!" she shouted angrily, but I'd already hung up the phone. The next day, she actually came to my old home looking for my parents. My mom called me. "Son, Mary was crying, begging us to tell her where you are. She said she wants to have a good life with you. Mom, tell her to get lost." "Son, are you really not going to reconsider?" I thought about it. "Mom, give her the phone." On the other end, my wife's voice came through. "George, have you thought it through?" I chuckled dryly. "Do I miss you?" No matter what Mary thought, I hung up the phone, cold as a stone. It's not that I'm heartless. It's that she never had any feelings. From this moment on, I completely see the reality. Those who treat me well, I cherish with my life. Those who trample on my dignity, I will never look back. I'm a person who never lets go of a grudge. In my past life, I was killed by a dump truck, and her white moonlight was definitely involved in it. This time, if I don't take him down, I swear I won't be human. In the evening, I contacted David. This name might be unfamiliar to Mary, but to me, he was a brother. The only person I could ever speak my heart to. My middle school classmate, David. David stopped studying after middle school and started working early in society. I used to have a good relationship with him, but after I got married, my wife didn't allow me to hang out with questionable people. She thought someone like David wasn't worthy of her social class and made me cut off contact with him. At that time, I was foolish and weak, so I stopped reaching out to David. David had become a contractor before, and recently it seems he's become a big boss. When I contacted him, he was very happy. "Brother George!" David's voice on the other end of the phone was so excited it was almost deafening. "You still remember me, David? You're doing pretty well, huh? I heard you're a big boss now." "Yeah, big boss or not, I just handle some shady business." "So, brother, you called me for something?" "Yes," my tone was low. "I want to ask you for a favor to deal with someone." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a laugh. "What the hell are you up to? You say, as long as it's not murder or arson, I'm in. Not murder, just a little something." My voice was as low as a blade in the night. "I want someone to have an accident, preferably a car crash. After it's done, they'll pay you $1 million. Got it?" David hesitated. "Brother, you're seriously ruthless." I lit a cigarette. "I want it clean. No traces left behind. Give me 2 days. I'll arrange for someone on my end." David's tone turned serious. "Brother, what grievances have you suffered? Do you want to come out for a drink first?" "Maybe next time," I replied coldly. "This time, it's the beginning of my turnaround in life." Meanwhile, Mary returned to the empty house, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the emptied room. Suddenly, she felt very cold. Tom called, "Mary, are you okay? Everyone at the party is waiting for you." She stared at the phone for several seconds before finally hanging up coldly. George's face flashed through her mind, along with the words, "Don't bother me while I'm eating." Her heart clenched sharply for the first time. She began scrolling through her phone, looking at the sweet messages George had once sent her, only to realize that in 7 years she had never truly responded to a single one. She had even forgotten when their last wedding anniversary together was. Now she was finally starting to panic. She finally realized that George was really gone this time. Mary sat dazed in the empty living room. The TV was gone. The sofa was gone. Even the refrigerator and microwave in the kitchen had disappeared. She crouched down and opened the cabinet. It was empty. The dishes and utensils had all been taken away. It felt like a dream. She shakily dialed George's number, but no one answered. She frantically flipped through the contacts trying to find one of his friends, only to realize she had long since cleaned out his circle of friends over the years, anyone who dared to get close to him. She would coldly stop them with a single phone call. She recalled the look in his eyes when he threw the photo in her face that day. Indifferent, calm, utterly cold. That wasn't just angry words. He was truly determined to leave. Mary began looking for a lawyer. She was unwilling to accept it and wanted to find out if he had already secretly filed for divorce. The lawyer checked the property transfer, household registration changes, and account transactions, and the results made her feel as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. He had already sold all the assets and moved out of the city, purchasing a new property under someone else's name with all funds flowing legally, making it impossible to recover. "Are you saying he has already left?" The lawyer nodded. "He has left, and he prepared everything very thoroughly." Her mind went completely blank. She had thought that with just one word George would come back humbly as usual. But now he didn't even want to see her. At this moment, she finally began to feel afraid. She was really going to lose him. At night, she sat on the bed and suddenly remembered that rainy night in the 2nd year of their marriage. That day, she had a meeting that lasted late. Her phone was off and she came home drenched. When she opened the door, George had already made ginger soup and was standing at the bathroom door waiting for her. She casually said, "Don't do things only children would do." He lowered his head without saying a word, quietly put away the bowl, and walked into the kitchen. She didn't take it to heart. Now, she suddenly remembered his hand trembling as he served the soup. Later, she found out that he had a fever that day, but insisted on making a pot of soup for her. That night became a memory she could never return to. The next morning, George stood on the balcony watching the morning lights spill into the room, feeling lighter than ever before. He opened his phone and looked at the message David sent. "Bro, everything's arranged. Clean. Absolutely clean. As clean as a natural disaster." George closed his eyes and nodded. He didn't know if the dump truck would eventually kill Tom, but he knew that in this life, he would never let anyone trample on his dignity again. Mary had to understand that once missed, it would be gone forever. On the third day, Mary went to George's hometown in person. George's mother responded coldly. "Why are you still coming here? My son said he never wants to see you again." Mary gritted her teeth. "Anne, I know it's my fault. I just want to know where he is. I want to have a proper talk with him." "Talk? You refused to live properly with him for 7 years. Is it even possible to talk now?" Mary lowered her head in silence. George's mother finally sighed. "He's in City X saying he wants to start over. If you want to go, then go. But I advise you don't hurt him anymore." Mary's fingers clenched tightly, her knuckles turning white. She knew she had to win George back. Otherwise, she would never be able to forgive herself in this lifetime. I curled up on the sofa wearing pajamas with takeout that had just been delivered to my feet. The TV was playing Lost on Journey. From this day on, my life was finally back on track. I canceled my old phone number and wiped all my social media accounts clean. The world grew quiet. No probing, accusations, or cold stares from Mary, nor any covert provocations from Tom. I turned off the TV, opened a blank notebook, and wrote 4 words. Life plan. 1, first, enjoy 3 full months of lazy, free days. 2, then start a side business to earn the first pot of gold. 3, buy a car within a year and drive it to the seaside. 4, find a girl who's willing to listen to me and eat with me. 5, Mary, get out of my world. I've never been this clear-headed before. Mary held a scarf in her hands. It was a gift George gave her on their wedding anniversary, ridiculously thin, but he had gone to 3 different stores to buy it. She had never worn it. Now she held the scarf as if holding on to his last warmth. "Hello, Mom," her voice choked. "Does he really not want me anymore? You haven't truly cared for him in 7 years. Isn't it too late to say this now?" Mary's mother sighed. "Daughter, he has really changed this time. He's not just sulking." Mary hung up the phone, looking at herself in the mirror. Her makeup was exquisite, her clothes expensive, yet they couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. The afternoon sun was scorching. Tom stood by the roadside, dressed in a neat suit, talking on the phone with someone. "Mary, isn't your husband coming back yet? How much longer is he going to make a fuss?" Although he asked, what he really thought was that it would be best if he never came back. Mary's voice was low. "He still refuses to come back." "I told you marrying him was a joke from the start," Tom said disdainfully. "If you divorce him, we can start over." "Tom," her voice suddenly turned cold. Tom was stunned. "What did you say?" "You're right. Marrying him was a joke. But now I realize I'll laugh for 7 years, and he cried for 7 years. After saying that, she hung up the phone. Tom stared at the disconnected call, his face as dark as the bottom of a pot. Suddenly, a sharp and urgent whistle sounded right beside his ear. He looked up and was instantly terrified. A battered car was rushing toward him without slowing down at all. There was no time to react. Amid the screams of passers-by, he instinctively tried to dodge but couldn't avoid being hit in the leg by the speeding car. His consciousness faded in the pain, and all he could do was watch helplessly as the car sped away. I arranged the last piece of furniture, opened the window, and the night breeze blew in. The city lights flowed like a river of stars. The phone rang. It was David. "Bro, it's done. Clean, clean." He didn't die, but one of his legs was ruined. The car that caused the accident was scrapped long ago, so there's no way to investigate. I was silent for a moment, then asked, "What about Mary?" I heard she stayed by his side at the hospital all night. You're really ruthless, I sneered coldly. This isn't ruthlessness, it's fairness. David suddenly grinned. You know what? She's looking for you now. Like crazy. I said calmly, I'm not in a hurry. Let her look. The 7 years she owes me will make her pay for a lifetime. Mary sat on a chair outside the ward, her face full of exhaustion. Tom was rushed into the operating room. His leg injury was severe and could likely leave him disabled for life. The doctor said it was an accident, but she knew it wasn't. She picked up her phone, staring at the familiar number, hesitating again and again, and finally sent a message. George, I was wrong. Can you give me a chance? 10 minutes passed. No response. She called again. The number was disconnected. Her heart sank completely. She finally understood that she couldn't catch up to him. I woke up, sunlight streaming in, and saw over a dozen missed calls on my phone, all from Mary. I glanced at them and deleted them. You want to win me back? I'm sorry. You are not worthy of the person I am now. Life goes on peacefully and steadily, and I continue my independent life. Although there are occasional troubles and trivial matters, overall I feel a freedom and ease I've never experienced before. I was drinking cola and scrolling through videos. One must enjoy life to the fullest when in high spirits. Never let the golden goblet face the moon empty. A verse I learned back in middle school, but only now do I truly understand its meaning. These past few days, Mary suddenly became extremely active. She would send messages every day, call me, and even come knocking at my new home's door, always shouting, George, I was wrong. She seemed to truly realize that she had lost me. But for me, it was already too late. I never thought I would become so resolute and indifferent after the divorce. The past weakness and tolerance completely vanished at this moment. Mary sat in front of the mirror, staring at the exhaustion in her eyes. The car accident involving her first love and Jor's departure, one blow after another, had nearly broken her. She decided that she had to make a change. I was sitting in the living room, drinking tea and watching the sunlight outside the window. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Mary. George, I know I was wrong. Please give me a chance. I really will change. I don't know how she found out my new phone number, but that doesn't matter. I smiled, feeling that this message was some kind of distress signal. But no matter what, it was all meaningless now. I swiped the screen with my finger and replied with a brief message. What chance did you ever give me? After sending the text message, I looked out the window and felt a long-lost sense of clarity. Without her interference, without that unappreciated love, everything felt different. Mary never understood why I became so decisive and resolute. She clearly knew I had always loved her deeply. Yet every choice she made slowly pushed me toward a dead end. Now, she finally began to feel the pain of loss. Mary stared at the message on her phone screen, her heart sinking sharply. She gripped the phone tightly, almost crushing it. What chance did you ever give me? This sentence left her completely stunned. She had never imagined that George would respond to her so coldly. She desperately tried to recall every little moment between them, striving to regain the warmth and intimacy they once shared. But the sweetness of the past had now turned into a glaring pain. She wanted to cry, but found that she had no more tears left. I sat on the balcony, took a deep breath, and felt that I had finally completely let go of the past. The messages from Mary on my phone screen hadn't stopped, still full of regret and pleas for love. But deep down, I knew there was no turning back. Suddenly, the phone rang again. It was a call from David. Bro, how's the plan going? Pretty well. Tom already knows he made a big mistake. As for Mary, she finally realizes what she's lost. I smiled, but she still hasn't learned her lesson. Keeps texting and calling me, begging for another chance. David laughed. She's desperate. Doesn't know what to do. I nodded. Yes, she's now paying the price for every decision she made. I don't want to deal with her anymore. Good brother. I'm not saying you're ruthless, but this move of yours is truly brilliant. Honestly, even if Mary got down on her knees begging you, it wouldn't matter. Nothing can move you anymore, right? David said. She's long ceased to be the woman I had in my heart. I sneered. She's already paid the price for everything she did to me. I no longer need her repentance. David laughed heartily. Brother, well done. Tom finally recovered from the surgery, but the doctor said his leg injury was severe and he wouldn't be able to return to normal anytime soon, possibly never able to stand again. Mary cared for him while secretly wiping away tears from the corners of her eyes. She knew that her future was no longer what she had imagined. She tried her best to fix the mistakes only to realize she had destroyed everything. Tom looked at her and said, Have you decided to start over with me now? Mary took a deep breath, her eyes flickering with a complex light. I don't know. I'm very confused. I lit a cigarette and sat quietly by the window. The night deepened and the city lights still shone brightly. My life had finally broken free from the shadows of the past. I am no longer confused, no longer hesitant. Every time Mary calls out, it only makes me more certain that I've taken the right path. She wants to make amends, but I no longer need her. This time, I have truly let go. Tom lay on the hospital bed, his surgically injured leg still wrapped in thick bandages. His body was weak, but it couldn't hide the unwillingness in his heart. He had just received a call from Mary, and her tone seemed to suggest she wanted to restart their relationship. That old affection made him waver, but it also stirred a faint unease about the future. At this moment, the hospital room door was gently knocked. The delivery person handed over a steaming hot dinner. Tom looked down to confirm it was the order he had just placed on his phone. Finally, I can have a proper meal. He forced himself to sit up, opened the food container, and was greeted by an enticing aroma, perfect in color, aroma, and taste. He raised his chopsticks without any guard and ate heartily. David sat upright at his desk, the phone screen lighting up with a message from his subordinate. Target is eaten. A faint, elusive smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Well done. Mary's care for Tom was more like a fuse. As long as Tom remained, many plans would be disrupted. Thus, an ordinary takeout became the final step in his net closing in. Shortly after the meal, Tom was struck by a sharp pain in his abdomen, his chest feeling as if weighed down by 1,000 pounds, his breathing growing increasingly rapid. How could this be? He struggled to press the call button for help, but his strength was completely gone. His entire body went limp on the floor, cold sweat trickling down his temples. Even lifting his hand was a luxury beyond reach. Numbness and stinging intertwined, and he vaguely sensed he might have been poisoned. Minutes later, a nurse pushed the door open and was shocked to find Tom unconscious, collapsed by the bedside. The doctor rushed to save him, but it was all in vain. The final verdict, death by poisoning. The night was as dark as ink. I stood by the window overlooking the myriad lights of countless homes. The phone vibrated and David's message flashed across the screen. Tom is dead. I simply closed the screen calmly. This game, the pieces have finally fallen. The white moonlight Mary once hoped for is now nothing but a trace of ashes. While she herself is steadily sinking deeper into despair, I wonder how Mary will react upon hearing this news. These days, life has become calm and orderly. I have completely freed myself from the shadows of the past, like a bird released from its cage, rediscovering a sky that belongs to me alone. Every morning when I wake up, I no longer have to worry about Mary's indifference in her face, the messages she sends trying to mend our relationship. To me, her presence has long since left my world behind. I can finally feel the kind of freedom I have been pursuing, that state of life without any constraints or burdens. But there is still a voice inside me constantly reminding me that I have never received the fairness I deserve. The marriage between Mary and me was not just an emotional betrayal, but a deep humiliation. Her betrayal not only destroyed the trust between us, but also reduced me to a mere shadow in this marriage. She gave me 7 years of indifference and hurt, and now it's my turn to seek justice for myself. Mary sat on the bed once again, holding her phone, her eyes filled with confusion. Now that Tom was dead and her husband of 7 years had decided to leave, she felt a deep pain inside. Every time she looked at those messages, seeing George no longer responding to her words, a sharp ache gripped her heart. She fully realized that she had done everything wrong. George. I was wrong. I really was wrong. She began to think that perhaps she would never be able to make up for the pain she had caused George in this lifetime. She once believed that men would always forgive women, especially the ones they loved. But now she finally understood that love needs to be cherished, and she had wasted the most precious love she had. She never imagined that George would let her go so decisively. He acted decisively and resolutely, like a sharp knife cutting through all her illusions. Now, even Tom was no longer her sole support. I looked at the latest message David sent on my phone, feeling a slight stir in my heart. Bro, Mary is really desperate now. She's already found a lawyer and is preparing to sue you, aiming to split the assets. I chuckled softly and put down the phone, but a new resolve had taken root in my heart. Mary, you always thought you could control everything, but from this moment on, you've completely lost all your leverage. Since you have decided to take everything that belongs to me, then I won't let you take advantage anymore. Does she think that by fighting over property, she can make me change my mind and return to her arms? This time, I will make her understand that not only will I give her no chance, but I will also make her lose something more important than me. My plan has already quietly begun. Mary's lawyer told her that although she had grounds to request a division of property, our side had already begun preparing a counterattack. If she continued down this path, she might face even more unfavorable situations. What do you mean? Mary asked anxiously. You can't make this matter public anymore, Miss Mary, the lawyer said with a hint of unease in his tone. Your side is clearly ready to respond. This lawsuit could very well push you into a more complicated situation. Mary's heart sank. Obviously, she had not anticipated things becoming so complicated. What should I do? She asked hoarsely. The lawyer sighed lightly. If you don't want to keep entangled in this matter, there might be a way. You can choose to settle and give up the lawsuit, but it will come at a certain cost. Mary lowered her head, a flicker of pain passing through her eyes. She had nothing left to offer in exchange. She finally realized that George had long seen through all her tricks while she remained trapped in the web she had woven, unable to escape. I stood by the window looking out at the world, my mind gradually growing calm. The more desperately Mary tried to reclaim what she believed was hers, the more I was determined to make her understand that she would get nothing from me and would have to pay the price for her actions. I contacted David. Help me investigate Mary's recent financial moves and see if she's preparing any big move. No problem, brother. Leave it to me. A few days later, David's investigation results brought a cold smirk to my face. Mary had already begun secretly transferring the assets under her name, preparing to move her personal wealth into a hidden account. She was trying to cover up her past mistakes with this move so as not to lose face in court. She thought that this way I wouldn't discover her preparations, right? No, she was wrong. Every step she took was under my control. Mary walked to the balcony, gazing at the distant city lights. Suddenly, she felt that all her efforts seemed to be in vain. She had sent George so many messages, yet he still hadn't responded at all. She began to feel some regret, wondering why she had been so confident back then, believing she could control everything, even George. Now she realized she had made a huge mistake. She had not only lost George, but also a complete Tom. And with every moment of regret, she was drifting further away from the happiness she desired. I closed my eyes, slowly exhaled, and decided to take the final step. I would no longer wait for Mary to dodge Cha, nor would I allow her to continue down this wrong path. She wants to take back what she lost. Then I will personally shatter all her illusions, making her fully understand that she can never return to the life she once had. My revenge plan has already begun. Mary leaned against the bed, holding a thick file in her hand. The file detailed all of George's asset transfers over the past few months, as if everything was under her control. She began to realize that she had never truly understood George. The decision made back then never took his bottom line into account. She thought he would endure and submit, but she overlooked the firmness in his heart. She believed she could easily win this game. But as she pushed further and further, she realized George had long been prepared. Like a silent leopard, quietly waiting for her to slip. She picked up her phone and dialed a familiar number. "John, do me one more favor." John was once a loyal subordinate of her father. On the other end of the phone, John hesitated for a few seconds. "Miss Mary, you have to understand. Things have already gotten out of control. If you continue, you will lose even more." "I don't care. I can't just let him take everything away," Mary said through gritted teeth. "I won't give up. I will take back everything that belongs to me." John sighed deeply. "All right. You have the final say. But remember, there's no turning back on this path." Mary gave a cold smile, not afraid. She hung up the phone, took a deep breath, her eyes filled with determination. I continued living a leisurely life, eating, working out, and handling some work matters every day. David called again. "Bro, Mary has indeed made a move. She hired someone to start gathering evidence, planning to sue you for your assets through the court. Does she think she has a chance?" I sneered. "She's only going to sink deeper. She found evidence through multiple channels. It seems she's determined to fight a tough battle." I frowned slightly. "It's fine. Let her make a scene. I wasn't in a hurry to strike back because I knew that once Mary made a move, she would also be trapped in an endless quagmire. Every step she took was hastening her own destruction. This game, in the end, I will definitely win." I whispered Mary had prepared everything today. She decided not to remain silent any longer. She put on her finest professional suit, carrying several important documents, ready to head to the courthouse. In her heart, a blazing fire of anger raged. Over the years, she had invested so much time and effort, and George's betrayal had cost her even more. She had long known that George leaving her was not just an emotional issue. Deeper behind, it was his defense of his own dignity, his response to her every coldness, his unreasonable stubbornness. She had once been too confident, thinking she could control everything. But now she realized she had taken a wrong step at every turn. But now, no matter what, she was determined to take back everything that belonged to her. Not just the property, but the man who once belonged to her, George. She walked into the courthouse, her heart filled with determination. I sat in the study, sipping tea, watching the messages from Mary flood in. This time, she chose to sue and was prepared to go after my assets. I wasn't worried because I knew Mary's foolish decision would bring even graver consequences for her. This battle was never just about money. She had chosen a path with no way back, and that path was destined to destroy her. "Mary, missing me is already the greatest tragedy of your life," I said softly, a trace of undeniable coldness in my eyes. Mary picked up her phone, quickly scrolling through the evidence she had gathered. She was ready to file a lawsuit in court, hoping to divide all of George's assets and even make him pay a heavy compensation. She imagined what it would be like to win in court. But fear and unease gradually spread within her. Every decision she made only strengthened my resolve to strike back against her. She never suspected that I had long been aware of her every move. A few days later, I finally couldn't hold back and took the initiative. I contacted a lawyer and officially began preparing to deal with Mary's lawsuit. The more she pushed herself into a dead end, the more ready I became to fight back. "We will take the toughest measures to counter her property division lawsuit," the lawyer stated clearly. I looked out at the city through the window, a cold smile curling at the corner of my mouth. "Mary, you didn't expect this, did you? Everything of yours has long been under my control." Mary's expression changed when she learned that George had already started responding to her lawsuit. She realized that things had gotten out of control. She had once believed that as long as she reclaimed the property, everything in her life could return to the way it was. But now she found that not only would George never forgive her, he was also fully aware of every move she made. "Happy to be so cold," she whispered to herself, anger beginning to swell within her. She had never imagined that she would come to this point, losing both her lover and her dignity. Now she seemed to have fallen into an inescapable abyss. I sat in the office looking over the documents, my mind completely calm. Every move Mary made, I was planning and calculating. I knew she was now deeply trapped in a dire situation. What she wants, I will no longer give her. The love I once had was met with her constant hurt and indifference. She can never make amends. A man must have his own career and money to say no to all injustice. I took a deep breath, my fingers lightly tapping on the table. This game, I was ready to claim the final victory. Mary sat on the sofa, her eyes vacant, her fingers unconsciously clenched around the documents. But she had no mood to look at the evidence that had already lost all meaning. She had originally thought that with her former status and influence in this world, everything could be easily controlled. She was even prepared to face this property lawsuit with the toughest stance, hoping to regain everything she once had, her assets, her dignity, and even the man who once belonged to her. However, now she finally understood all the misalignments. George's counterattack was far more thorough and ruthless than she had anticipated. Every move she made seemed to tell her that all her schemes were in vain. She finally realized that what she had lost was not just a man, but all trust and dignity. I stood by the window, watching the sky gradually darken at the horizon. My heart seemed to grow colder with each of Mary's futile lawsuits. Every time Mary struck back, it only strengthened my resolve. The closer she came, the more I wanted her to truly understand what loss meant. What she wanted, I would never give her again. "Lawyer, are you ready to handle this?" I turned my head to look at the lawyer sitting by the desk. "Yes, we have made thorough preparations. Mary has mobilized quite a few resources this time, but she has overlooked many crucial pieces of evidence. We can completely strip her of all support in court," the lawyer said confidently. I nodded slightly, a cold smile curling at the corner of my mouth. "She thinks she can turn everything back to how it was, but she's wrong. Every step she takes only brings her closer to her end." The lawyer glanced at me with some doubt. "George, are you really sure you want to go on like this? Mary's counterattack is clearly strong. She will cause us some trouble." "Her counterattack? She's just been driven to a dead end." "A final desperate struggle," I said calmly. "She gave it her all. yet never truly understood that she had simply walked herself onto a path of no return. Mary's face grew paler and paler. She recalled all the years with George and suddenly felt as if it had all been a dream and her efforts seemed utterly meaningless. Once, she thought she could do whatever she wanted with ease, but now she realized she was nothing more than a ridiculous puppet. With everything long controlled by George, she began to understand that this time George was truly determined to deal with her ruthlessly. There was no emotional mercy, nor any chance of turning back. She stood up, walked to the window, and fixed her gaze on the buildings across the street. The city lights were dazzling, yet her heart was shrouded in an unprecedented emptiness. She began to waver, wondering whether she should continue the battle with George or choose to give up and leave it all behind. But the unwillingness to accept defeat lingered in her heart. She did not want to surrender. The day of the trial finally arrived. Mary wore a simple professional outfit and sat calmly on one side of the courtroom. Her lawyer stood with the opposing team, ready to face the upcoming courtroom debate. I stood on the other side, waiting for the trial to begin alongside my lawyer. Mary looked at me, a trace of barely concealed anxiety in her eyes, but she quickly regained her composure. She believed she was well prepared to completely drive me out of her world. However, she didn't know that I had long prepared my counterattack. After the trial began, Mary and I each presented our own evidence and arguments. My lawyer displayed evidence of her repeatedly transferring assets and how her actions had disrupted the balance of our marriage from the very start, harming our shared interests. Mary's lawyers seemed somewhat overwhelmed, although they produced some of Mary's innocent statements. They were unable to refute the solid evidence I presented. Every time Mary tried to argue back, my lawyer easily countered, gradually dismantling her defense. She grew increasingly flustered, her expression no longer calm, and her eyes flickered from time to time. She knew she had lost control, and at that moment, I finally saw her true face. A few days later, the verdict of the trial was finally announced. Mary lost the case. Not only that, the court also decided that she must compensate me for all the losses I suffered in this marriage and froze part of her assets until the final settlement was completed. When she received the court's judgment, she almost collapsed to the ground. She couldn't believe that she had reached such a desperate point. She had paid a heavy price for her former pride, and now her world had completely collapsed. I stood by the window, watching the city as night fell, feeling not a single ripple in my heart. I knew that this battle had finally come to an end. Mary's final counterattack proved that she had completely failed in this game, and I finally regained the dignity that belonged to me. All of this was not the revenge I wanted, but the ending she deserved. She chose betrayal, chose indifference, and in the end, she alone must bear the consequences. The court's verdict had come into effect, and Mary walked into her empty home expressionless. There was no familiar sofa in the house, no warm lighting, only silence. She no longer looked at the old photos, nor did she sift through the letters from the past. Everything seemed to tell her this relationship no longer belonged to her. Mary's tears fell silently. She knew that none of this could ever be undone. Her former pride and arrogance ultimately brought her irreversible consequences. I stood on the balcony overlooking the entire city. The nightlight spread across the land, and the traffic on the streets flowed like rivers, quiet and steady. Mary's final counterattack was destined to be her despair. I felt neither pride nor joy, only that everything should be this way. She thought she could control everything, but she overlooked that true power comes from inner resilience, not external schemes. Her tears no longer concern me. Once she had the chance to choose warmth and forgiveness, but she deliberately chose betrayal, indifference, and manipulation. And today, she got what she deserved. I put down my phone and walked back to the living room. The wind outside gently blew in, bringing a touch of coolness. My life had finally returned to peace. Mary finally understood everything. She stood in front of the mirror, looking at her face that had lost its luster. The tears in her eyes could no longer find any excuse for the mistakes of the past. Her tears could not wash away the error she had committed. Her regret was already too late. She recalled what George once told her. What you missed was not just me, but the love you never truly cherished. Now she finally understood the meaning of those words. She realized that true love requires heartfelt effort to nurture, not just endless demands and control. She lowered her head, looking at the photo in her hand, in which she and George were nestled together, smiling brightly. However, she could never return to the time behind that smile. I stood by the window, gazing at the distant night view. There was no ripple in my heart, only a deep sense of relief. I have stepped out of the shadows of the past and reclaimed the self that belongs to me. Those past hurts and betrayals no longer shake me. Mary's fate was her own choice. I have simply walked calmly to where I am today. Perhaps one day she will realize that the one who missed out on me was ultimately herself. In the end, Mary chose to leave and began a new life. As for me, I finally welcomed the peace that belonged to me. I no longer troubled myself with the past, nor felt confused by anyone's decisions. All I know is that how life should move forward is no longer bound by the past, and she, in the end, could only bear the consequences she created alone, trapped in her memories.